Hi, Adrian, and thanks to be here. I would like to thank you at the name of the Buturinis Association and also the Still Photography Gallery. Adrian Kerr is the curator of the Museum of Free Derry and also author of the book Free Derry, Protest and Resistance. The first question that I want to put you through is what the Bloody Sunday meant for the people of Derry in the past, and what does it mean today?
Bloody Sunday was, I don't know, probably the most important day in the history of the city. It came about at a time when, in response to the oppression that nationalists in the north had been facing, and most starkly nationalists in Derry had been peacefully protesting to try and gain equality in the north, and that had descended into conflict. I think Bloody Sunday at the time was a message to the people of Derry that any attempts at peaceful change would be met with force. I think it left the people of Derry and Ireland in no doubt that to move forward in what they wanted at the time, which had become more constitutional demands rather than the equality demands of the 1960s, that whatever they tried to do, there was going to be a violent response to it. And I think a lot of people responded by going, well, look, if they're going to shoot at us, we're going to shoot back. I mean, it was a massive trauma to the city at the time. I mean, 14 people died, 17 were wounded, but in a city like Derry, that was so many families affected, so many groups of friends. You know, this was an impact that went far, far beyond the small group of families to the entire city. I think was traumatized by it. Across the wider north, nationalists saw it as not just an attack on the people of Derry, but an attack on the nationalist Republican community in the north that had to be responded to.
Okay, thanks. The second question is, the Bloody Sunday is still today an open issue. I would like to resume the phase of the struggle for justice. In June 1972, the Widgery inquiry concluded that the soldiers were forced to shoot because the victims were armed. In 1992, the families of the victims founded the Bloody Sunday Justice Campaign, pushing the British government to open a new inquiry. In 1998, Tony Blair announced that a new inquiry will be established. In June 2010, in view of the Savile inquiry conclusion, David Cameron declared that the behavior of the British Army were unjustified and justifiable, declaring the innocence of the victims. What is today the next goal of the campaign?
Well, when the campaign was started, there were three demands. One was the repudiation of the Widgery report, and that has been achieved through the release of the Savile inquiry. Widgery is now no longer the official version of events. The second was a declaration of innocence for all of those killed and wounded, and that was very, very clearly achieved through the publication of the Savile report. There was an unambiguous declaration of the innocence of everyone, even though in the case of Gerald Donaghy, it was very unjustly qualified by the fact that he might have been carrying nail bombs when he was shot, but that he wasn't using them at the time. Therefore, he was innocent, but not quite. The third demand at the time was the prosecution of those responsible. And that is what a lot of the family members are chasing now. You know, if everybody that died in Bloody Sunday was innocent and they should never have been shot, then what punishment is there for those, not only for those who pulled the trigger, but for those who organized it, who planned it, who set it in motion in advance? And the current situation with that is that after a number of years of a police inquiry, it was announced that, to the disgust and dismay of many of the families, it was announced that only one soldier, Soldier F, we're not allowed to name him any further than that, even though his name is very, very widely known, that only that one soldier, who the Savile report had found had killed 5 that day, that he would be charged with the murder of 2, Jim Ray and William McKinney. and the wounding of a number of others. Now, that was very, very far from satisfactory, but at least it was something. At least it was an acknowledgement that what happened that day was murder, at least in the 2 cases where he was charged. But since then, the British have announced that they want to discontinue the charges against Soldier F, which would leave no one facing a court. 14 people were murdered, 17 people were wounded, yet no one would be facing a court for what happened. And then soon after that announcement, the British went further again when Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, stood up in Parliament and announced that all legacy investigations, not just criminal investigations, but inquests, civil actions, everything else in the historical events in the North would end. Now, the British claim this is because they want to aid reconciliation in the North and help us all to move on. They also say that it isn't to hide the actions of British soldiers, because British soldiers only killed 10% of the victims here, and that the vast majority of those killings were lawful. But, I mean, that is a lie on all counts. This is not to aid reconciliation in the North. This is to hide the British role in the North. The claim that the British Army only killed 10% of the victims, again, British soldiers in uniform, British police in uniform, yes, 10%. That doesn't include the actions carried out by members of the British security forces out of uniform. It doesn't include the large, very large scale collusion with loyalist paramilitaries. I mean, even last week, we had a report that linked the security forces to 19 murders carried out by loyalists. We had an admission by David Cameron a number of years back that I think something like 80% of the targeting information that was used by loyalist paramilitaries in the late 1980s, when they were very, very active, came from British security forces. We know at the time that loyalist paramilitaries had been armed by a British agent, Brian Nelson. And on the third point about the majority of them being lawful, every time there's a new inquest or a new report into security force killing, it seems to find that the British did wrong. So in terms of the third demand of the Justice Campaign and for the prosecution of those responsible, it goes now far, far beyond Bloody Sunday. There are hundreds of families here who lost loved ones either directly at the hands of the British or through British connivance. And they're all being denied justice now. Or the British want to deny them all justice now. It doesn't mean that they're going to get doing that without a fight.
Yes, I agree. Also today, the presentation of the exhibition, we recall also the Ballymurphy massacre and all the other action by the British Army that didn't find.
Well, the Ballymurphy massacre is another very famous one because there were a lot of victims, but there are so many individual cases that aren't so well known outside the North, that where families are still waiting for justice from the British.
Okay, thanks. And the last question is that in view of your role as curator of the Museum of Free Derry, how much important is to keep alive the memory and pass it through the new generation?
Well, I mean, it's an old saying, but doesn't mean it's not true, that if you forget your history, you're doomed to repeat it. It is really important that people understand what happened here, not only within Ireland, within Britain, but in the wider world. That, the conflict in Ireland, it was largely pre-internet, and the world saw it through the lens of British media. So in a lot of cases, they got a very, very biased version of it. It was presented as an IRA terrorist campaign and nothing else. With little or no reference to British state violence or loyalist violence. So first off, we need to keep telling not just our story, but other stories as well, to balance the record, to get the right story out. And I mean, we get accused of rewriting history as if rewriting history is a bad thing. History is there to be rewritten as new information comes to light. And, as historians, there's an obligation on us to keep rewriting history as soon as as new information comes to light. But it's important that generations growing up in Ireland know what their history is, know what their parents and grandparents went through, and know the truth of it, not a sort of Chinese whispers version that is passed down, presenting a completely different view of what we actually experienced here. It's not history in Ireland yet, you know. It's not like we're keeping an old history alive. It's still current affairs for us, very much so. And there are people, especially the British, who would just like to sweep this under the carpet, say we should move on, we should forget about our history. But that is not the way to reconciliation, in my point of view. The way we need to move forward is, yes, we need to accept we have very diverse perceptions of history in the North. But the aim shouldn't be to try and force all that into one agreed view. The aim should be to understand and acknowledge and then discuss all of the different points of history, so our perceptions of history. So it's really, really important that we keep this history alive, not to keep old wounds alive, not to try and stir up further trouble, but as a way to try and understand why we ended up how we did, and how to finally resolve it, and how to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Okay, thank you so much. It's the same thing that we are trying to do in our little with my books, and also with this exhibition by Gian Butolini, is to spread this history in the right way, and not as being told till now. Okay, Adrian, I would like to thank you again, and thanks to reply to our question.
Gianluca, it was a pleasure. Nice talking to you. Thanks.
Thank you.